Bamfordrose, and another question of the week. This week it's Rapide, a goodbye or not? For those of you who can't be bothered to watch the whole video, then the answer is obviously yes, it's an Aston, so go out and buy one. Okay, thanks very much, goodbye. For those of you who need a little bit more persuading to buy the Rapide, then stay tuned and we'll review the Aston Martin Rapide. Rapide was launched to the market in 2010 and had a 470 bhp version of the 6-litre naturally aspirated V12 engine with a 6-speed ZF auto transmission, the same that was in DB9. For its length and weight, the Rapide hit a whopping 188 miles per hour top speed and managed 0 to 60 in a very respectable 5.2. In 2010, Aston really wanted to eat into a significant chunk of the Porsche Panamera pie and thought sales were really going to take off. Unfortunately, that never happened. Aston launched the Rapide in 2010, just at the point the economic crisis of that era meant that sales of V8 and DB9 were on the decline. Before that happened, Aston had made the decision to produce the Rapide at a facility in Austria run by Magna Steyr, a really good manufacturer of niche cars for various different manufacturers. But from day one of production, the economic crash of that era meant that Gaydon actually did have capacity to build Rapide. So that was hiccup number one for Rapide, in that it could have been built at Gaydon after all. Hiccup number two was the sales figures never really set the world on fire. Now, Aston really thought they were going to eat into the Porsche Panamera market, where Porsche commanded something like 66% of total sales of four-door sports cars. At best, Rapide only ever ate into that chunk by about 6%. The initial contract with Magna Steyr was supposed to run for something like 2010 to 2018, but it was cut short at 2012. In the first year, 2010 to 2011, 2,000 units should have been made, but I think they only reached something like 1,250. In 2012, they're rumoured to have chopped production as low as 500 units. And in 2012, some 6 years before it should have ended, the contract was terminated. This would have been because Magna Steyr want to make a lot of cars and Aston wanted to cut its volumes. I'm sure Aston had to pay their way out of that contract by quite a significant sum. So there was a period of about a year where Rapide wasn't made. The production line was brought back to England and set up in a different facility away from Gaydon. And then that's where the Rapide S was born. So from 2013, the Rapide S increased to 550 bhp, gained 2 mile an hour top speed, hitting 190 miles an hour, and reduced its 0 to 60 time down to about 4.9 seconds. In 2015, 2 years later, the Rapide got the 8-speed ZF box, and supposedly the AMR power pack gives Rapide approximately 595 bhp, but oddly there's no 0 to 60 time reduction. That's still declared at 4.4 seconds. Whether it's Rapide, whether it's Vanquish, any V12V that AMR or Aston power pack is attached to, it's keeping the primary catalyst. I'm very, very dubious that 600 horsepower is achieved, because even when we remove the primary catalyst, fit our high flow manifolds, high flow secondaries, we're only just hitting that. So any power pack that keeps the primary catalyst, I'm sure it achieved the performance it needed to on the dyno to sign the pack off for sales, but how that translates into real world driving performance, especially when the 0 to 60 time isn't reduced from that power pack car over a standard car, then it does bring into question the actual tangible horsepower benefits that that kit brings. But the Rapide S did get some other nice touches: carbon ceramic brakes, Michelin Pilot Sports on a 21-inch rim, and only 210 units were made, so that makes that car quite a rare and collectible piece. So the original DB9 from 2010 to 2012, and then the S from 13 onwards. In Europe, total sales to date is only 2,172 for the whole of Europe. So it does make Rapide quite rare, and if you go on Auto Trader today and have a look in the UK, there's something like only 30 cars for sale, when in comparison there's a good couple of hundred DB9s. In 2010, the cost of the car new started from 140k, which at that time the three competitors would have been Porsche Panamera, Bentley Flying Spur, or get a V12 Vantage and a Range Rover Sport instead of your four-person Rapide. So for whatever reason it was, either lack of interest in a four-door sports car, or because you could buy a couple of other different cars for different uses and achieve the same end result. The Rapide didn't sell very well, but today, for the money that you can pick up a 2010 Rapide for, typically 35 to 45k gets a real nice one. Today it makes this car a serious consideration if you needed the extra occupant or luggage space. Arguably, undoubtedly, the Rapide looks better than the Panamera or the Bentley Flying Spur of its age. The driving dynamics of the Porsche is probably better than the Aston. For other occupants, probably the Bentley is the nicer place to sit, but for the driver the best seat is to be had in the Aston. So that's a very quick overview of Rapide. Now let's go and drive it. But as with any review that we do here on an Aston, it's more about how the car makes you feel, what the car is suited for, the purpose that you want, and those values of ownership, experience and pleasure that the brand brings. We're not about to put the car to a limit around a track, put the brake into a limit. Out of the box, for 95% of drivers, every single car is going to handle, brake and perform adequately. But if you are seriously interested in a Rapide, then one thing you must do is identify what you're going to use the rear seats for. Now, if this was to get a couple of kids in the back, maybe they don't need a booster seat, or if they did need some seat, then you need to check if you can put the seat in, how much room there is, or if they're young adults, shorter people, then you need to check that they can sit in the car comfortably. If you're trying to get a full-size adult in the back of a Rapide and cover some distance, then you really need to make sure that everyone is comfortable with that. I'm 6 foot, and any 6 foot person, if you sit in the back of a Rapide, you're going to be quite scrunched into that seat. You'll sit in the seat in comfort. Your feet will sort of go under the seat in front of you, okay, your knees are going to be pushing up against the back of the seat. The problem is that you're sort of cocooned in that space. You've got the big seat in front of you, the roof is quite close to your head, you've got the side pillars of the car. Then when you add motion to it, it's going to be quite easy for someone on the edge of getting motion sickness to feel quite uncomfortable in the back. So if you were buying the four-door sports car to get an extra 2 people in, then you really need to check that everyone's going to be comfortable. If maybe you're getting it because of the extra load space, because you can put that rear dividing hatch down and fit quite a large amount of luggage in the boot when you fold the rear seats down, and it's the odd occasional use of someone in the back, then this is going to be fine. So enough of the history of Rapide. What's it like to drive one? Well, I hate to state the obvious, but it actually feels no different than driving a DB9. Obviously the car is a little bit longer in length, but on the move, on country roads, you don't really notice any of that at all. Rapide has adaptive electronic suspension as standard, which gives it a smooth magic carpet-like ride. And whether you press the button to go stiff mode, or the system senses that you need stiffer damping, then either way, it stiffens up when you enter into a corner. Of course you feel the extra few hundred kilogram over DB9, and of course you feel the longer wheelbase, but that's if you really start to push the car on, and this isn't the car really designed to push on in. You know, it's a GT cruiser, perhaps you've got some other people in the car, and on other cars where you might consider a manual or an auto. Certainly Rapide is an auto, manual wouldn't suit this car at all. So, you know, really it's for wafting along in comfort, in luxury, with the odd bit of spirited progression, but that's going to be on a straight. I don't really see anyone buying a Rapide to push it in the bends. So the extra weight that Rapide carries over a DB9 and that longer wheelbase, I doubt anyone's going to feel the limitations of that. I worked for a brief period at Bentley and I'm used to driving a Flying Spur. The Flying Spur is much heavier than this Rapide, and on these roads I remember driving a Flying Spur and that weight nearly catching me out for the first time because I was so used to driving Aston. The impact on handling that extra weight of the Spur has over the Rapide is nowhere near the difference that the Rapide is over the DB9. However, one of our customers has a Porsche Panamera and we were fortunate enough to take that out for a drive, and again on these same roads the handling capability of the Porsche far exceeded the Rapide. The acceleration of this car is more than adequate. You've got that V12 engine producing close to 600 Newton meters torque and 470 bhp. Now we do modify Rapide to go quicker, but because this is a cruising car, there's not many people that want to do that. Because you're not driving this car as spiritedly as you would do, say, a DB9, means that you don't approach the bends at the same sorts of speeds that you are in the DB9, meaning that you're not leaning on the brakes as much. So even though essentially these are the same brakes, maybe a little bit larger contact surface area, but essentially the same brakes as a DB9, with the much heavier weight, you really don't notice that. So we're on our Bamfordrose loop now, and we'll drive this Rapide as we would do any other car, very responsibly for testing purposes. And the Rapide is nothing other than confidence inspiring, planted, gives you good feedback. If you wanted to make a little extra progression, it does reward you. It's certainly not limited to being a GT cruiser. A common niggle with any of the Aston range is borderline acceptable air conditioning, and Rapide is no different. Compared to the Bentley or the Porsche, then the aircon on those cars are in a different league compared to Aston's. It's sort of okay. As I say, it's borderline acceptable. You've got to have the aircon on pretty much full pelt, which in turn makes the cabin quite noisy because the fan motors are running, and only then at full pelt are you just about going to feel comfortable. But in the Bentley, you'd be freezing cold with only a slight gush of the fan motor audible. And if your passengers in the rear had their laptops open, you'd be able to hear the C drive of their laptop clicking away. That's the difference between the cabin of the Bentley and the cabin of the Rapide. Those early Flying Spurs were not nicknamed Flying Turds for no reason. Obviously the model year 13 Spur had a nice facelift, and then its lines were really sharp, and that car is very nice indeed. But what we're doing here is comparing the 2010 Rapide with that early Flying Spur. Brand values, performance, the driving experience, value for money, and I personally think the Aston is going to cause less hassle in a workshop trying to get fixed. Now that the cars are approaching 10 years old, I think the Rapide beats the Spur on pretty much every measurable. Against the Porsche, I think the Rapide beats the Porsche clearly on looks, because the Porsche isn't a beautiful car by any stretch, but dynamic capability, reliability, value for money. Now, you know, you can pick up a really nice Panamera for sub 30. Then there's probably quite a few measurables that the Porsche beats the Rapide over, but the Rapide is an Aston, and that trumps a Porsche any day of the week in my book. So should you buy one? Well, arguably, back in the day, from its inception since 2010, the Rapide has been a flop. It certainly didn't break into the four-door sports car market in the way the factory wanted. It was arguably overpriced, depreciated very quickly, and one reason it didn't sell was because for its brand new purchase price, you could have had a V12 Vantage and a Range Rover Sport. even though you can get the family in the Rapide, as soon as you go anywhere near the loud pedal, all of the other occupants are going to start complaining at you. So you might as well just waft along in your Range Rover Sport, which has got a bit of grunt when you put your foot down, and then have the V12 Vantage for your own play toy. But now this model is 10 years old, you can purchase this car for about £5,000 less than its DB9 counterpart of same age and same mileage. A Rapide of this age can be bagged today for around about £40,000, which makes this a phenomenal buy 10 years later. I think it would work well if it was something like a third car, so whatever the sporty-ish daily driver was like, then something like V12 Vantage, N430 for the Sunday hoon car. Maybe other family members already have a Range Rover or SUV, so to make a nice car to go away in for a change and make an occasion of the drive of getting somewhere with a few family members and luggage in tow, then as something like a third or fourth car, then this Rapide makes a really good option. I do know customers who use Rapide for an everyday car, and for sure, whilst that's not a problem at all and quite possible, servicing repair costs are really going to be no different than a DB9. Whilst the size of the car whilst you're out on the road isn't a problem, if you had to keep parking it in confined spaces, it's going to be a bit cumbersome. And as opposed to filling a third or fourth car role, if you're using it as a daily drive and the family touring car, and then car 2 was something like a V12 Vantage or a more 3-hour on a Sunday spirited drive type car, then that's another possible ownership experience. So whilst you could arrive at your holiday destination with the family and luggage in tow in luxury and class, or it was your everyday car pitching up at the office in the same luxury and class, then the Rapide will fulfill that purpose and be a very rewarding car to drive. It's just that I wouldn't seek thrills and a spirited drive from a Rapide. It's not that kind of car. And that's sort of why I do recommend buying a Rapide from the original era, 2010 to 2012. It sort of gets less viable the newer you go. And a Rapide S with its supposed 600 horsepower that is trading today for about £150,000. In terms of a financial investment, you're going to lose some money on that. In terms of buying a new car and enjoying it for a few years and then selling it for, I don't know, in 5 years time, £100,000, maybe even less than that, then today the Rapide S means today it's as wrong to buy a Rapide S at 150k than it was to buy this car in 2010 brand new. But even if you bought this in 2010 brand new, and perhaps today you still own it, then you know you've bought a friend, you've bought a car to live with for life. The depreciation forms no part of that buying and ownership experience, and that's fine. I hope you like that little overview of Aston Martin Rapide. As always, it really helps us if you can like, comment and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.